Good evening, everyone. My name is Camila Pritchett, and I am Executive Director here at the Black Archives History and Research Foundation of South Florida, housed here at the beautiful historic Lyric Theater Cultural Arts Complex. And I welcome you this evening on behalf of the staff and the Board of Directors of the Black Archives. We are excited to partner with Miami for the Poetry Festival 2023 kickoff event tonight. I would also like to take a moment to welcome and acknowledge Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, representing Florida's 24th Congressional District, here with us this evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all that you do for our community. And I would like to also acknowledge our other special guests this evening, the members of Greater Miami Chapter of the Links Incorporated, of which I am proud to be chapter president. So welcome for coming with us tonight. This evening's discussion about how cultural activities forge a sense of space is actually aligned with the very existence of this neighborhood that we're in right now. Historic Overtown, first known as the Central Negro District or Colored Town, was not the chosen space, but a space that Black people were relegated to as they were excluded from the community at large. But what was born of that exclusion came the creation of a community that was an arts and entertainment mecca for the people who lived here. The sense of place cultivated by artistic expression was evident in the neighborhood's nickname as the Harlem of the South. During the time of the Harlem Renaissance, the Colored Town community was known as being a very bustling arts and entertainment hub where everybody who was anybody in arts and performance would come through, because as they would perform at the venues on Miami Beach, they could not lodge there on Miami Beach. So when they came to Overtown to stay in Overtown, they often ended up performing in the venues in Overtown for free. So how wonderful it is to have a conversation here on a stage that's in a building that was built in 1913 by a Black businessman. This is actually the 110th anniversary of the Lyric Theater's construction this year. And it is the work of the Black Archives and community partnerships such as ours with Miami that allow for us to amplify important voices like the ones that you will hear tonight. And I also have to take a moment to thank our sponsors, the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Agency, Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, City of Miami Commission Chair Christine King, Miami-Dade County Commissioner Keon Hardiman, the Black Archives members, and our private donors. All of you are the ones who help us bring this kind of programming to the community. So if you are not yet a supporter and you would like to join in that number, there are QR codes conveniently placed in the lobby that you can scan, and it will get you very quickly to our PayPal account. You can show your love there. So now I would like to bring out Mr. Scott Cunningham from Miami, who's going to bring greetings on behalf of that organization. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed the program.
Good evening. Thank you, Camila, and thank you to the Lyric for welcoming us into this beautiful space. It's really special to be here at the outset of the 12th annual Miami Poetry Festival. My name is Scott. I'm the founder and director of Miami. And at Miami, we believe that Miami is the most poetic city in the world. Throughout the year, we teach poetry to kids in schools and publish poems and books in unexpected places. And this month, throughout the month of April, our goal is for every single person in Miami-Dade County to encounter a poem. So thank you for being a part of that mission today. Thank you so much to our founding sponsor, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. This event is made possible with the support of the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor and Board of County Commissioners, and with the support of the City of Miami Beach Cultural Affairs Program Cultural Arts Council. Miami also receives incredible support from the George M. Perez Family Foundation at the Miami Foundation, Poetry Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, Florida Department of State Division of Arts and Culture, Academy of American Poets, and the City of Coral Gables. We want to thank our festival host committee, who did so much amazing work in the lead up to this event. And they are Tracy Slavens, Asha Elias, Amy Stojanovic, and Mara Jensen. Thank you. And everything that happens this month absolutely could not happen without our incredible staff. They are so amazing. Please say hi to them, thank them. And our incredible board of directors, many of whom are here tonight. They support us all year long and make all this possible, so thank you to them. Thank you. So you may have seen this thing called the Dade Poets Society. There's a couple t-shirts running around. So the Dade Poets Society is a new major donors program that we've created to support and uplift Miami's work. We had a little event before tonight. We have our next event on April 26th. But if it's something that you feel like is right for you, we're still accepting founding members. We'd love to talk to you. You can talk to us at the table out front, or our development director, Marie McGrath, is here as well. Just ask for her. The fact is, though, the vast majority of our donors are small donors. They give us less than $100. We also have a QR code. It's also on your festival guide, so you don't have to scan it right now. But if you want to, I'm not going to stop you. The funds are critical to our work teaching poetry in schools, publishing Miami Voices, and paying artists. Most of you, I hope, got a tote as you came in. The totes are an Miami tradition. We make one every year. We give them away for free until they sell out. Many of you were probably asked to fill out a survey to get your tote. The surveys are really important to us. We use that data not only to produce better programming, but also in reporting to our funders how we're doing. You know, we have this mission of reaching everyone in Miami with a poem. We want to know how we're doing, and the surveys are a big part of that. So thank you so much for filling one out. We also collect a little thing called Zippodes. This is one of them. One of my favorite ones from last year. You may have noticed we have a billboard up downtown right now where we're going to put one Zippode on the billboard next week. It's really beautiful. I can't wait for you to see it. It's an incredible poem. But if you submit your Zippode before April 20th, you still have a chance to be one of our readers at Vazquez on April 26th when we do our annual Zippodes finale. You can read at Vazquez with Biscayne Bay behind you. It's always an amazing event, so please send us your Zippodes. We love to read them. We also do poetry in public places projects all month. So that's really a lot of what the festival is how can we bring poetry to Miami's populace, not ask them for people to come to us. So one of those projects, which is actually the largest project we've ever done, both in terms of scale and cost, is with a group called Boa Mistura. They're a collective from Madrid who do mural projects. And so the first thing we did after we invited them to come here was we went to Miami Beach High and we started teaching poetry to the students there. We took their poems, we sent them to Spain for the guys to read them. They picked one poem and one line from that poem, and that poem is going to be painted on those water tanks in the city of Miami Beach. So on one tank, it'll be in English, and the other tank it'll be in Spanish. And the student whose poem was selected is a 10th grader named Valentina, and so I wanted to show just a really short film that features her and shows you the moment when we revealed the design to the kids, and then Valentina, she was the one who was picked.
Yo vine a Miami Beach hace un año atrás, y este punto de vista del inmigrante me ayudó a inspirarme en este poema.
Finding my home in every voice that I hear. Which one you like the most? Let's go for it. Raising hands for proposal 1.
No lo podía creer, pensé que estaba en un sueño, que no era real, no era real. Fue muy impactante, sentí toda una presión en el corazón, una emoción. expectante para ver cómo sale este proyecto y muy feliz y contenta.
So they'll start painting on April 14th. So if you're on the beach and you're that way, like slide by, you can watch them paint. And the project will unveil it on the first week of May. So we're super excited about that. We also, another one of our projects which you can participate in is Poetry Parking Tickets, which is a project by Christina Frigo, which is, it's poems by Miami students on what look like Miami-Dade parking citation tickets. I find that it's really fun to put this on a friend's car. And then stand back and wait for the reaction. So if you haven't gotten some yet, please get some from our table. So there's gonna be, if you go to our website, there's lots more projects. Also, please, all of these authors are going to be, there's two of them, all the authors. They're gonna be signing out front after the event. Books and Books, our incredible partner, we love Books and Books, is hosting the signing and selling their books. So please support them, support the artists. We also have a table for All Miami where we sell the books that we make. This is our most recent book called More Than What Happened, The Aftermath of Gun Violence in Miami, which is an anthology of Miamians, which was edited by Nadej Green. It's a really beautiful book, and there's more there. All sales of All Miami books go to helping us produce more books. It's a vicious cycle, but we're trying to keep it going. So this goes all month long. Here's some of the upcoming events. This is Dolly Parton, rendered in type. So tomorrow, if you have kids, we have an open mic reading for kids where they come in their pajamas in the Miami Beach Botanical Garden. Then we have this workshop that's centered around Dolly Parton. On April 4th, we're at Simply Good for a conversation about Naja Moon's project, Portrait at 34. On April 5th, Pastelitos and Poetry. Do I really need to sell that? April 6th is basically beer and poetry, so it's a really good consecutive night for me. And then April 7th, we're at the Bass on Miami Beach for three incredible readers. Clint Smith, whose last book debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. He was on The Late Show with Colbert on Thursday night. Jose Olivares, who was at the festival a few years ago, who you may remember. And then a Miami-born poet named Jalen Utsi. And then on April 8th, we have a poetry dinner at Rosie's in Little River, which we're really excited about as well. So if you don't already, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at All Miami Festival. All the rest of the schedule is on the website. You can find it easily from our homepage. All right, so let's get to the fun stuff. So we have two artists tonight. They're each gonna come out and give you a taste of their voice, and then we're gonna have a conversation here. So our first reader is Alexandra T. Vazquez. Vazquez is an associate professor of performance studies at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and the author of The Florida Room, chosen by Pitchfork as one of the best music books of 2022. Her previous book, Listening in Detail, Performances of Cuban Music, won the American Studies Association Laura Romero Book Prize in 2014. Vazquez is a proud graduate of the New World School of the Arts High School in Miami, Florida. Please welcome Alexandra.
Hello, hometown. Before I read, I just have to say such gratitude to Scott Cunningham, Monica Peña, and Melissa Gomez for this homecoming after my almost 30 years of wandering in exile in the sands of New York and New Jersey. So I'm very appreciative of them bringing me back here. And the staff of O Miami has been incredible. And I think we can sense from already the good vibe of this event that all happens by way of the staff. So thank you very much. And I also cannot believe in a theater in an area that I think every step we take in this area, one can hear music rumble up through the ground, that I'm here in this historic place where Ethel Waters once sang. So this is an incredible moment for me, and I'm very moved by it. Thank you so much. So this is, I'm gonna read the end of my latest book, which is my second book, The Florida Room. And I'm reading the end of the book because there are so many here, alive and otherwise, that were my beginnings. The family that made me and the one that I made. Teachers, friends, this is always my intention is towards you. Okay. I am here because of a surprising convergence in Gainesville between my mother from Ormond Beach and my father from La Habana while they were students at the University of Florida and its eventual fruition in Miami. My writing life might be a working through, with my own symptoms, their deep and resolute attachments to the state and to the island. Being born into this fascinating melancholy is part of what trained me to listen out of place with strong feelings of being in place. This Floridian convergence offers a skill set to hear songs such as Dwayne Allman's Please Be With Me and Archie Shepp's Invitation, together with Los Van Van Soy Todo and NG La Banda's Los Sitios Entero, as a spiritual and material home in this extended and, to my stubborn heart, temporary away time in New York and New Jersey. Some cannot leave Miami because the structure won't allow it. Others who do may leave because of proclivities for what Little Beaver suggested in both parts of his great song, Party Down. Others have long fled for political reasons or for a general inhospitality to their misfit sensibilities. Still others need to leave to find work. Those who leave for whatever reason often have a hard time staying alive while away. There are also those who move for the ordinary curiosities shared by those in other island nations about what else and who else is out there up there. My reasons are a mix of these, and life on the road has meant a collection of fragments that spoke to my ambivalence to this place I never in my truest body left. The unrelenting longing and more fleeting revulsions for Miami were mirrored in other cutaways and found in the unlikeliest of places. And now, I'm gonna skip the next two paragraphs because it's like a whole Theodore Adorno part. So theory nerds, come find me after if you wanna talk about that. But Adorno did actually, he was a tourist here in Miami, one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. So this pivot from horrified disgust to the appeal for some much needed togetherness, dressed to impress with loved ones, as many of you are here tonight, is what Miamians, those of past and present, feel whether we are living there or not. It is a pastime of many, no doubt many of you here, especially those who remain, to talk about how much they revile Miami. There is much to discuss, and I'm not trying to call the eye of Sauron right now, but there is much to discuss. Its terrifying politics, the continued apartheids made of race and real estate, the stripping of public institutions, the traffic, the violence, the starkness of unlivable poverty, and the most brazen wealth locally and internationally extracted, the environmental destruction, and other strange events that seem unique to there, but they keep staying, you keep staying, and we keep going home. I keep going home. Part of the internal conflict that made the writing of this book, The Florida Room, take so long, and for real, it took me like over 20 years, starting with my undergraduate thesis on Sam Cooke's performance at Live at the Harlem Square Club in Overtown, right here, when I was 21 years old, and I'm more than 21 years old now. But so part of the internal conflict that made the writing of this book take so long was that question that nags so many who can't live where they're from: how to write in the trenches if you can't actually be in them full time. But then a directive imperative to do it on so many of the musicians and interviewees' cues that I've had the honor of listening to. Some of here are in the audience tonight. The great Linda Williams, the queen of Coconut Grove West, is right here. Betty Wright, who's our kind of patron saint here today. Anyways, okay. Directives to write this were everywhere, actually, even appearing while walking down the street in my New Jersey town. I was wearing a Miami Heat t-shirt that day when a Legba figure approached me and asked, mid-stride, "You like the Heat?" I answered, "That's my hometown." He said, "Miami?" "Yep," I said. As he walked away, he fully roused the spirits with this oral gift: "Go with it. Go with it." I went with it. And because of Miami's history and everyday raising and amnesia, there was an urgent composite portrait that I needed to put together and share all at once, like this book, like now. I can barely recognize where I'm from, even as I visit for extended period several times a year. Riding with and through and despite the disorienting buildup has given me all the more reasons to set some things down for the collective record. All right, here's a roll call for the people in the audience. The Florian Convergence is a Baroque altar that gave me the great fortune to be in so many places at once. The annual experiencing of Daytona's Bike Week and Miami's Calle Ocho in the same month. Concerts at Bayfront Park with typical lineups that included Casey and the Sunshine Band, Santana, and Celia Cruz. And it was banal, right? Amazing. Joe Walsh forgetting the lyrics at Metro Zoo. Parking lot bass in the dancing outer bands of the party inside Luke's. Prince's Glam Slam Club when South Beach started to figure out the cover charge. Underage nights with New Order in the Grove at Upstairs. Funk at Rose's Bar, disco nights at the Cameo, roller skating sessions to Boogie Shoes at the Kendall Skating Rink, and later Pretty Tony's, the party has just begun at Hot Wheels Skating Center. Eddie Mix spinning at South Miami Junior High. DJs opening stores at Dadeland, the Dade County Youth Fair and its jammed signals between the patrons' freestyle and the ride operators' classic rock. The super cute commercial jingle, the Opalaka Hialeah theme song, the jukebox and concession stand at Bird Bowl, Tropical Park-based dance-offs. These are not signposts for nostalgia, but marks of my generation still. The city that bursts with nightlife in multiple language, even in the daytime, remains fast and strong. Those who remained and those who keep arriving continue to add to its ongoing shanty. They are creating even more dimensions for the greater Florida room, conceptualizing it differently and beautifully in ways and spaces far beyond the $1 million condos with the art to match or the clubs with a bottle service. Making do with the makeshift is their only structural code. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The book is outside. You can get it afterwards. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio. His essays and music criticism have been published in The Fader, Pitchfork, and the New York Times, among other places. His accolades include the New York Times bestseller list, the Lenore Marshall Prize, the National Book Award long list, and Book of the Year nods from Esquire, NPR, Oprah Magazine, the Los Angeles Review, Pitchfork, and the Chicago Tribune, among others. His latest release, A Little Devil in America, was a winner of the Andrew Carnegie Medal and the Gordon Byrne Prize, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. In 2021, Abdurraqib was named a MacArthur Fellow. He's currently a staff writer at The New Yorker and a graduate of Beechcroft High School in Columbus, Ohio. Please welcome Hanif. Hi, everyone.
Well, first off, it's just so great to be here. I haven't been back in Miami since 2019. We haven't done anything with Miami since 2018, so it's really great to be here. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Alexandra, for being here. And I'm really excited to get to share in a homecoming because I love homecomings. Bad news, FAU lost. So they too will be coming home. Right before I went on stage, I got like a text and I looked at my watch and it was a friend of mine who just in all caps was like, they lost. And I thought, well, that could mean a lot, but tonight I know what it means. I'm gonna read a little bit from There's Always This Year, which is a book that is not coming out this year, it's coming out next year. But it's, you know, and I don't want to talk too much because I know we have a small time to read, but you know, it's a book about, for me at least, like basketball is a container for it, but it's also a book about who gets to make it out of a place and why. And additionally, it's about what it means to never want to make it out of a place. And I have an expansive story about that maybe I'll tell on the couch, but for now I'm gonna read some of the last bit of it. And yeah, thank y'all for being here. To flex in a place where not everyone has the means to flex is vanity, but it is not only vanity. We are all trying to stunt on someone. After all, I'm not above it now and was certainly not above it then. Even with no food in the cabinets and no clothes on my closet, I knew I could piece together something that might hold the attention of someone on the block who had less than I did. To stunt on those you live in close proximity to is also a type of intimacy. It requires a level of knowing. I know the heights that you cannot reach, the ones that I can barely ascend to but can still ascend to, at least today, and I love you for your limits. I love all of us for what we do and don't have this beautifully unbearable container of heat, of sirens, of bike chains popping, and black sneakers that have seen better days. The borders between the stunt and being stunted on are flimsy when the come up happens in small, barely noticeable increments until it doesn't. I love the stunt, for how it opens the gates to dreaming, and I love anything that pushes against the door of reality and offers an elsewhere. I don't need the elsewhere to be better, I just need it to be somewhere else. And I remember at the courts when the dealer with the mean handle but no jump shot to speak of let me sit in the passenger seat of his 96 Mustang, if only for a moment, if only to run a hand along the leather, if only to watch the lights flickering across the stereo in the center console, if only to sink back into the seats and feel like I was being swallowed by a newer, darker planet. And it is only when the Mustang stopped coming around, and it is only when he stopped showing up to the courts altogether, that I learned the other lesson, the lesson that begins with loss and nothing else. I don't remember where I was when the news hit that my high school's old point guard was found dead in a car. I don't remember which time I was locked up when I passed my high school's old swingman who could truly fly, chained at the wrist in a tan jumpsuit, same as I was, the two of us sharing a startled moment of familiarity and then never seeing each other again. I do remember the Columbus Dispatch in 1999, where all of them were on the cover, the whole starting five, arms crossed at center court in our school's gym, this band of brothers who seemed like they might win it all, like they might be immortal for a little while. Sometimes there are funerals, and sometimes there is nothing. No portal through which grief can be passed. No housewarming for the new grief that furnishes the ever-growing tower that we carry, that we are responsible for whether we want to be or not, both landlords and tenants within our own sadness. And sometimes it just happens, grows while you sleep. Death isn't the only way to die, though it can be argued that it is the most merciful. There were 3 rims at the park across from my father's house, and even in the utopian universe of the park, there was a hierarchy, the full court, which sat at the center of the park, and then off near the back, beyond the never-used baseball field near the school's exit, there was a single rim lording over a single small half court. The rim was never adorned with a net. Even at the start of summer, when the fresh nets were put on the other 2 rims, this old one was left naked, covered only in the rust that had accumulated through the years. But this rim was where the kids played. The younger siblings, the cousins, the friends of friends, all of us too small or otherwise, not yet ready to play on the full court with the older kids, but still in love with the game enough to want to fire the ball towards an unkempt halo of rust. And to pass the time, we'd take turns trying to beat an imaginary clock. Someone would throw a ball in the air and start counting down from 5, maybe 10, depending on how far out the ball was thrown. And then it was just you against time and nothing else. And all that mattered was that you made the shot before your crew howled out the noise that was supposed to sound like the buzzer at the end of a game, but most often sounded like a choir of birds strangled by the clouds and screeching on their descent to earth. And yes, it was best if the ball slipped through the rim, but it could be argued that there was also magic in the shots that missed, at least for how that missing would invite the orchestra of laughter, high-pitched and uneven but still sweet. The axis upon which success and pleasure tilts is flimsy, and some days I would have rather failed but been in awe of the rapturous joy I got to fold into with my crew, boys who were not yet big enough or good enough to play on a court where the games mattered, and so we made our own game, one where we could be small and inconsequential gods, architects of the miraculous. Miss enough shots, and when one falls, time slows, and bliss becomes elastic. We would hold our follow-throughs, our fingers extended and frozen towards the sky, though not like Mike. We loved MJ, but there were Michael Jordans on our block. There were Michael Jordans walking among us. Jordans 4 houses down, Jordans at the bus stop. If I hadn't made it clear yet, let it be known that some of us never once dreamed of leaving. Never thought about making it out of any place as glamorous and glorious as this. Tell me if you have ever built a heaven out of nothing, and then tell me what it would take for you to look for a new one somewhere else. The people who circle this heaven from the outside wouldn't know this, might think everyone's trying to make it somewhere, through ball, through music. That's another myth. Crack, rock, or jump shot, courts and cages and caskets, everyone getting out one way or another, or some might say, but I never wanted to be anywhere other than where I was. My 2 feet planted on concrete that was breaking, but still satisfied to be of use. I never wanted to stray far from the shitty speakers weighing down old trunks, the symphony of bass and rattling metal, the smoke that drifts from an open window, an arm swinging from it, a wrist dangling out the side, a gold bracelet on that wrist, the sunlight running its fingers along the links, the shine of it echoing for blocks. My people are here, and my people built the here in their image, and at least for a few precious years, there was nowhere to make it out of. We built the impossible utopia. You can't see the fence, but it is there. It'll keep you out too if you don't come correct. The gangs were never our enemies, but the people who look upon where we stay and see gangs in every gathering certainly were our enemies. But I ain't never gonna complain about who don't come around. If that's what it takes, then yes, gang everywhere. A gang of stars mob the infinite cloudless black. A gang of black blooms infinite through a mob of dripping light which reflects off the sweat mobbing the skin of the black kids who should be home, but are instead ganged up on the dying summer. The night itself, sweating out a gang of shouts that swallow the gang of sirens. The echo of a ball fired off a backboard mobs the silence which was hardly ever silence around here anyway. A whole gang of porches and mobs of good folks set atop them. A gang of shoes or bare feet stomping the old wood, beckoning a mob of dust to fly skyward before settling right back down where it was, where it always has been. The homie leans back in the grass while a gang of fireflies decorate the absence over her head, and he says, I'm gonna have me a gang of kids, and my kid's gonna have a gang of kids, and we ain't never leaving. We're gonna own a whole block of houses right here in the hood. And so consider this. Some of our dreams were never your dreams. Some of our dreams never will be. When we were young, so many people I loved just wanted to live forever where we were. And so yes, if you are scared, stay scared. Stay far enough away from where our kinfolk rest so that a city won't get any ideas. They will burn down or build over a neighborhood for nothing. Doesn't matter how many stars are built or born on a cramped court. Doesn't matter who gets a community center named after them, but trust, there are more of us, always, whole gang of us. Some of us carved our names into trees, into the wet concretes of new sidewalks. Some of us took small knives to metal and wrote our names into the death traps of the playground. And so we stay, one way or another. We never make it out, and we never disappear. Permanence is the greatest stunt of them all. This feels like I'm gonna put this here. No, I'm gonna put it behind me.
I think we should start with that expansive story, if you're ready for it.
Oh, yeah. Well, so first off, again, thanks everyone for being here and hanging out. So a friend of mine, when I was working on like the first draft of that, in my head at least, a friend of mine had just gotten out of prison, or I was gonna go pick him up from prison, from the east side, kid I grew up with. And I went to his mom's house before picking him up, just kind of being like, you know, because it's a long drive. He was out in like Marion, Ohio. So like, is anyone from Ohio? No? One person, shout out to you. Oh, two. Wow. We're here. Yeah, so it's like an hour drive, you know, and I was like, you know, like, how do you want me to, you know, how do you want me to best handle this on the drive? Like anything you want me to say to him? And she's like, you gotta make sure he doesn't come back here. You know, not like just broadly like to the east side. She's like, he's gonna get in trouble. And it was a second strike, so if he went down another time, it'd be like a big number, you know? And so I said, oh, I mean, okay. And so on the drive back from, you know, I picked him up from the precinct, and on the drive back, I was like, listen, man, like, what can I do to get you set up? You know, like, I get you an apartment in the burbs, you know, we can get you, like, We can get you like an apartment in like the fancy place where the white folks live, and ain't nobody gonna bother you. You know what I mean? He was like, what do you mean? I'm going back to the east side where we're from, where we grew up. And I was like, yeah, I mean, sure, but you know, your mom's was like concerned. And he said this thing that I'll always remember, because I was kind of, you know, it's kind of like, listen, man, like numbers wise, if you fuck around again, the boys gonna come get you and like get you for real this time. And he said this quote that, I made it the epigraph to the book. He said this thing that was like, well, if they come to get me, they gotta come get me from here, because we built this place as kids, and I'm not leaving it. And the only way I'm leaving it is if someone drags me out of here. And that was kind of the propulsive thought for that book of, you know, I live in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Like, I bought a house in Columbus in the neighborhood I grew up in, and I never once thought about leaving. Like, I never thought I'm going to achieve my way out of this place. I thought living in the place that I love is the achievement, you know? Or like going back to the place I grew up and being able to live there is an achievement and something. Yeah.
And so, Alex, could you talk about the concept of the Florida room? Because I feel like that's almost like a metaphorical or metaphysical version of what Hanif's describing. It's almost like a way to create a Miami that you don't have to leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's. Am I?
Yeah, you can pick it up.
This?
Yeah.
I love holding a microphone. It's just can you hear me okay? I guess, you know, I've been kind of working on these bits and pieces of this book for a really long time, these little fragments that just kind of blew my mind away. And I had I had initially called the book The Florida Project, but then that guy made that movie. Stole it right out from under me, which made me all mad. And then, you know, then I was like, okay, we're so, when you grow up here, you're so kind of used to this kind of gimmickry, this like promotional selling stuff. But I started as a joke, you know, I was like, I think I'm gonna call this the Florida Room. And part of the reason I did that was because who doesn't love a Florida room? And I'm very expansive about the way I mean Florida room. I mean, there can be a Florida room inefficiencies as much as they can be in a kind of suburban home. But why it was so important to me was it's a very locally rendered thing that it's impossible to keep all of the elements out. And more than anything else, in my long study and living and being with the music and the histories of this place, a really intense frustration with how so many of the populations in this place were always talked about apart. So you have the kind of Cuban story, or you have the black story, or you have the indigenous Florida story, and I needed a place to put them all in the same place because that's how the music sounds and that's how it feels. So it was both really taking this thing off this architectural model, but at the same time, I need a place where everybody, even if the relationships are contentious, even if there's, you know, kind of uncredited theft, even in all of those difficult things, I needed everybody to be here all at once. And that's why I shoot. What was I just gonna say? Oh, and then the really funny part about it was I interviewed a lot of people for this book, and that's one of the greatest pleasures of what I do, because just such a blessing to meet such incredible people. But then I kind of started asking everybody, well, did you have a Florida room? And you'd be surprised across class, ethnic, racial spectrums how many folks chimed in and had these amazing stories. Oh, that's where my tia went, or, you know, I used to spend the night out there sometimes. That's where we sent the dog. That's where we watched TV. There were so many articulations of it that it became this really fun parlor game amongst, you know, Miami kids and grown Miami kids.
I love that. Which is why I asked the question. Yeah. So one of the things I think that unites both of you, I mean, you're writing about very different places, Ohio and Miami, different in some ways at least. But I think both of you, I think if I picked out a paragraph of any part of your oeuvre, like chances are I'd know where you're from. You know what I mean? Like it's probably been mentioned at one point in the paragraph.
Totally.
And so I want to, like, do you think of the place that you're from as a muse? Is that too simple a concept? Like, what's the, is it an engine? I guess I'm trying to think about how it drives you, or how you think about it in relation to who you are as a writer and what you're writing about. Does that make sense?
No, you should. I don't know. A muse, I mean, let me put it like this. I guess you could say a large part of the criticism that I've also done is like a New York Latin music scene, right? I've done a big bulk of scholarship and writings about that. But when I'm listening to that stuff, when I'm writing about that stuff, I'm listening to freestyle, I'm listening to bass. And so it's almost like this grace note that accompanies me anytime I write anything. I'm so strongly Miami identified. No place has felt adequate as a home for me other than this place, but at the same time, I am one of those kids for one reason or another that had to leave. I had to leave for a minute. But muse, when I think of a muse, I think of like a, oh God. Watching what I'm saying, but a muse is kind of like a gendered, kind of softy, nymph or whatever. Miami is not that for me. So it's very difficult and very hard. And the stuff that I write about this place and have for a long time, it's really painful histories to think about. But I will say this, literally whenever, I will say it accompanies me as I'm trying to take that writing break, walk around the block. Like it's Uncle Al in my ears when I'm taking the block walk, or I'm listening to, Trinaire, or I'm listening to Expose or Fox or whatever. So animus maybe, a giving back, a wishing certain things were different, but also relishing in how beautiful, in the particularity of this place. But every year that passes by, you realize how special this place is, and just, anyway. Not a good answer, but.
That's a great answer.
No, come on.
Do people here know the boxer Buster Douglas? Yeah? Buster Douglas, for those who don't know, knocked out Mike Tyson. First boxer to knock out Mike Tyson. And I was 7 or 8 when it happened. And because of Mike Tyson's record of dispatching of opponents very quickly at that point, I remember it was a Sunday night and school was the next day, but all of our parents were kind of like, you can stay up and watch the fight, because everyone thought that shit would be over in 2 minutes. Because Buster Douglas was allegedly very outmatched. Buster Douglas is from the hood in Columbus, like from the neighborhood next to the East Side neighborhood I'm from. And when he knocked out Mike Tyson, he won the heavyweight championship of the world. There's this thing I'll always remember, even as a very little kid. He flew back to Columbus from Tokyo, and he drove down the street really slowly with the championship belt hanging out the window so that the kids could follow him and touch it. And I think about this all the time because there was no one there to archive that. And so the story of Buster Douglas then becomes that he was a failed heavyweight champion who won and then very quickly lost the belt. But in the city where I'm from, where black kids specifically don't really give a fuck about, if you're a champion once, you're a champion always, to us. What I'm mostly saying is that the muse, when I think about the muse, is the absence. What I'm writing into the absence of story, the absence of narrative that has kind of plagued Columbus for a long time and flattened the people who I think really deserve that. And I have to give a lot of love too to Will Haygood, the nonfiction writer Will Haygood, who's a hero of mine, who, another wild thing about Columbus is the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated, the year after, East High School in Columbus won a state title in basketball and baseball in the same year. And for a long time, no one knew that story. And then Will Haygood wrote this book, Tigerland, which is stunning about that whole era. And I think if there is anything I am driven by, or the way that I look at the place I'm from and write into it, it's because I know that I have an archive of this place that is, to me, almost mythological in nature. And also, those stories are absent in retellings of what people imagine Columbus, Ohio to be, because people don't really have an imagination around it. And it's a city that doesn't have an imagination around itself either, right? And so it is continually like tearing things down to build more high-rise condos because they're imagining themselves to be like the next large tech industry, and they've been doing that for the past decade, and it hasn't happened yet. But if they just keep building more condos, then maybe it'll happen, you know? And so as a city becomes unrecognizable, I feel responsible as someone who recognizes it to write towards that recognition before it becomes almost dust.
I think in Miami we almost have too much imagination, maybe about what this place should be. I feel like we're just assaulted by the imaginative dreamings of this is what Miami's going to be.
Yeah. And since its founding, right, it was completely saturated in these. Let's make it this. I mean, there was a lot of kind of like old advertisements that had, a man in a turban on an oriental carpet, like Miami, the next, magic city, and just all of these. So I think that those place fables are very strongly made here too, where in some ways it doesn't, we need hundreds of people to keep telling the stories about this place, and so many people have come before us, and it's up to us to keep telling them differently, old, young, across the genres, journalism, radio, scholarship, poetry. I think what's amazing about Miami, right, is that we're giving what you all are doing is showing the city this. Am I going in and out? That's all right. But this kind of different idioms. It's different language, different idioms. I can do that. I can write about this place like that. I remember when I was young, seeing Joan Didion's book Miami on the bookshelf, and as there's some problematic things in that book, but I took it off the shelf, and as a kid, I was like, oh my God, you can write about this place. Like, we can write about this place. It was a kind of revelation that.
Oh, you've created the perfect segue.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't want to talk about Joan Didion's Miami.
That's okay. Yeah, no.
But there is a Joan Didion quote about place that I wanted to bring up, but it's actually
amazing about place.
It's actually from the White Album. Mm-hmm. But it's a quote that I both love and also struggle with, which is what she says, and she's writing about Hawaii in the piece, but it doesn't really matter. She says, "A place belongs forever to whoever claims it hardest, remembers it most obsessively, wrenches it from itself, shapes it, renders it, loves it so radically that he remakes it in his image." And I love this quote, but there's also like a possession in that I personally don't feel comfortable with in terms of Miami, you know what I mean? And I wanted to contrast it with, I promise there's a question coming. I wanted to...
You have like 2 comments?
Yeah, I got it, exactly.
2
This is
comments
more of a
equals-
comment than a question. This is the monologue portion. The monologue portion. We'll get back to these guests in a second. But so you mentioned some of Zora Neale Hurston's documentation of Florida through the WPA project that she did.
She's our greatest theorist.
Yeah.
Zora Neale Hurston, and a lot of people don't understand her that way, but Zora Neale Hurston, the great creative writer, playwright, novelist, everything else, she is one of our greatest Floridian historians.
Yeah. And so she documents this place that you mention in your book, which is called the Land of Czar, which is further than far, is the idea. And it's a place that she learned about, that people told her about, which is a mythical place that would always be out of your reach. And what you say about it is that Florida is a beginning rather than an ending. It is an actual location that you can go to and an imagined dwelling that affirms even conditions of degradation, heaviness with life. And I wanted to see what you think about the contrast of those two things. In one sense, like the Didion, like, I'm going to write about this place and redefine it, and no one's going to be able to remember what it was like after I wrote about it, with this idea that the place is always going to be beyond you, and you're never going to be able to get there in some sense.
Speaking of Hurston, and I'll tie into this, what I love Hurston, and what I love about Hurston is that she is the first writer who I read who was writing the way she heard her people speak, like really directly from voice to page. And it has to be said, she was like villainized for that by the other black writers, because they were kind of on some like the Renaissance. It was kind of on some like the white folks are watching type shit, so you got to tighten up the language, you know. And Hurston was really in defiance of that. Like, was offended by that because she was like, well, this is how the people are. In my first book of poems, The Crown Ain't Worth Much, there's a series of poems in the voice of my barber. And it goes through this arc of his barbershop being closed down, which it now is closed down. And people, when that book came out, would always be like, well, how did you get the voice? How did you? And I would have to be like, oh, no, that's literally, like, I'm essentially transcribing my barber, right? Like, literally. Like, he and I looked over those poems together. There's 4 of them. And transcribing his voice into the work, which is me saying, you get to live beyond this shop, right? They're going to build something else over this shop, but you get to live on somewhere. A lot of my writing around Columbus is, I think, echoing that idea of this is going to be gone, but it has to live somewhere. Paired with this thought that when I grew up in the 90s, and so I grew up in this kind of like golden era of black film that was orbiting this idea of particularly, specifically young black men coming of age. So like Menace Society, Juice, Boys in the Hood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember feeling like those worlds in those films were not that different from my world. All that was different was there was an implication that the location, the setting of these films added a narrative weight to them, where it's like young black men growing up in the heart of New York City is more appealing or more enticing, or young black people in general. And I grew up around nothing but young black folks in like very vibrant area where like my friends' mothers would be on but these kind of things. And I thought, well, that's worthy too. Like that's also worthy of documentation. And I'm not that interested in remaking Columbus's image for the world beyond the city. I'm interested mostly in writing a catalog of work that ideally someone younger than me years from now might stumble upon and say, okay, well, this place that I live is worthy of pursuit, creative pursuit. And someone else did it. And someone else like didn't run from it. I'm not like knocking any other writers from Columbus who like lived and existed before me clearly, but I'm mostly saying that like I want a body of work that absolutely, the whole project of There's Always This Year is, which is a book that, to be clear, no one wanted, like that was a book I wanted to write after They Can't Kill Us, and no one would let me do it for years. But I kept pushing it because I was like, if I write a book that is deeply about the east side of Columbus, very specifically about the east side of Columbus, that's gonna matter, hopefully, in the years after this. Not because someone from somewhere else might be like, oh, wow, look at this, I feel like I'm in the city now, but because someone who comes up on the east side of Columbus and wants to write will see a version of their history reflected in something I've done, and I think that's more important.
I'm such a nerd, I'm going back to the texts. So, like Joan Didion's work, and she's such a kind of funny, small bird observer, right? And that's how she kind of describes everything. And Zora Neale Hurston, on the other hand, she was a black woman driving her own car, smoking cigarettes in the Jim Crow South with recording equipment. And recording equipment is not like the dictaphone or anything like that, but we're talking like various apparati, right, that she would have to travel with and really talk to the turpentine workers in Florida and really talk to folks that were cutting sugar. But, and this is where I really like to kind of pivot in some ways out of writing and moving into song and moving into music, because what Hurston is one of the great founders of what we get to do is to think about how music theorizes place, or how music tells its own stories about place. So you get these moments in her anthem. I mean, we're talking stuff that she was doing like in the 30s. And she would just kind of pop a song in the middle of her work. And I think that's really the ideal form of scholarship, because there's nothing we need to do anew. And in fact, when we say we're doing something new, we're caught up in a really terrible legacy of violence when we do that, right? So what I would suggest is I think that music and songs and musicians give us this whole other way to imagine how place is never over, how, for example, some of the music that comes out of this neighborhood, especially in the 50s and 60s, we haven't even begun to theorize what that means about place. And part of the tragic story is a lot of those masters have been held on to, not distributed in the ways that they should, but there's so many histories being told about this place, and in a science fiction, futuristic way that was happening in the 60s from local artists that never got the distribution that they deserved, right? So I think that in song, taking it out of text a little bit gets us to a different ethics of how we think about history, how we think about populations, how we think about communities coming together or not. And I know Joan Didion was also she had the Rolling Stones, and she had like Mick Jagger in the background as she's writing too, literally like at parties and stuff. But what Dr. Hurston was doing was really showing a geography of Florida through music that I think we need to constantly go back to and learn from, how we can keep thinking about this place and allowing it to have its own thing. I don't know.
And even like voice tells. So, I mean, we're here, and I love one of my favorite. I think maybe, I don't like making definitive statements about records and stuff, but
we can do that tonight.
I do think one of my most adored live albums is Sam Cooke at Harlem Square Club, right? But which was recorded, of course, like
Right
here we are, right here.
Like a
couple blocks away, right? And like, if you play Sam Cooke live at the Copa and then play Cooke live at Harlem Square Club, like back to back, it's a fascinating study in just how place can be, the voice can be informed by place, right? Like Sam Cooke at the Copa, that's a good live album too, but he's definitely like stepping into that Negro Sinatra fantasy that had been built for him, right? And he comes here, and like Bring It On Home to Me is like extended by 5 minutes. You know, like every song has this like very black gospel extension added on to it. All this call and response, all this, because he knows that he can do that, right? And I think it actually numbs the impact of that when I saw a writer call it code switching, which I guess that's the shorthand for it, I get it. But that actually numbs the reality of how place and comfort impacts even the singing voice of one of the greatest singers of all time. And like knowing to look out in the audience and even see some of your people, what that can push you towards. And I think that is how place can also be defined through presentation of song.
And it was brazen, I mean, in that record, and you can hear, it's readily available if you've not heard it. To me, it's one of the most important history lessons about Miami and popular music, period. But when you listen to it, you hear people making out, you hear people fighting, you hear pushback to Cooke, right? Like you're not bringing it all the way. Like it was a very demanding audience here, and they just, it's hilarious. They pushed him to the limits of his own voice and thinking, I think.
Yeah, that reminds me too, when I was reading your book, Alex, I had to stop and go look up some of the music constantly, because a lot of the things you're referencing I'd never heard before.
Great.
Yeah, good, right? But also, one of the things I noticed is that a lot of it was not readily available, on like streaming platforms and things like that, or at least the ones that I subscribe to. Maybe on Ben's Pandora it was available, but we have a friend who only listens to Pandora.
In 2023, no less. I didn't even know you could get Pandora still.
I don't even know what it is.
You don't need it. Trust me, you don't need it. Sorry, I apologize to anybody in the audience who's a Pandora enthusiast.
I don't even know what it is.
Put the logo up. There it is. And so, it's interesting when, like that loss is happening there too. It's not just in the collective memory, but there's also loss there. And I wanted to reference that specifically with one of the freestyle songs. And I think this is actually maybe from your freestyle essay. It might not have been from the book.
For the audience, I wrote the definitive scholarly essay on Latin freestyle. saying, because it's hidden, but
Yeah, and
was,
I don't have
did it a long time ago.
I didn't have JSTOR access, so I had to ask a friend. I was like,
Hey, well, but like if you want to, you're a freestyle fan, you know, like you got Judy Torres is in there, Lisa, like all kinds of folks. If you're into that, anyway.
yeah, I'll send it
I'm
to you if you want it.
It's
I
old.
got it.
It's like from 2009 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
And I think in that one you reference, I mean, there's two things about it that I love, and I hope we can get to both of them. One is you reference Enquete. Is that?
Enquete.
Enquete.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm from Boca.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's one.
Yeah, 561. That is
561
my.
in the
it's-
house.
I
Yes.
still got it.
Yeah.
That she has a geographical rap at the beginning of "Shake It Through the 61st," where
wish I could
I mean
play
she's
it on
literally
my
like
phone.
naming like locations. Like
Yes.
that's just part of the song, and she's just naming places. And I think you talk about that as like it's almost like a cultural history, and you know, and I'm sure most of those places are gone now. You
Well,
know?
it's what's great. What's amazing about that? Well, it's the who's heard of Enquete? Come on, yes.
Yeah, I was listening to me.
Thank you. Shake It, Do the 61st
Yeah.
is their big. It's beautiful, and it's 3 teenage girls. One of them named Enquete, so it was like the singular and the plural, and it was like sampled. I think it was Mr. Mix that did that, but it's like samples of like James Brown, Get On Up. There's Kraftwerk in there. There's some Frank Zappa samples. Crazy stuff. And then you have the voices of these young girls calling out. You know, like in Latin music, we could get that all the time. Like, right, Puerto Rico, Cuba, right? Everybody gets their shout out, right? And it's really exciting when they call it, right? It's really exciting. But what they do is, they're calling, also in hip hop, right? They're calling out of different regional places, different things. But what they were doing was calling out not only these huge capitals like New Orleans, but in Miami, it has its own subsection of like different, like Brown Sub, Liberty City, Overtown, Little Haiti, Little Havana. So not only did they name these cities, but they were allowing these like little kind of microclimates of cities in the song, and they're like 16 years old. And to me, and I make this argument in the book, they're a direct inheritor of Zerd Neale Hurston's work, and it just happens to be in song. They're also amazing, or she's also amazing because I think she has. I'm not on social media, but I think she has a really funny Instagram account that people laugh about a lot. But also some of the only female MCs in the what we call Miami-based, and they're
Can
amazing.
I have? So I'm a bit, because you mentioned Lisa, who I adore.
Yeah, she's
And
really important.
Some folks maybe know this about me who are here, but I'm like a notoriously aggressive vintage t-shirt collector, vintage band and vintage music. Right now I have, does anyone know the West Virginia prog rock band Crack the Sky? Probably not, but they're a really great band, and two, they're very resilient. Like they've been going since the 70s and no one buys their records, but they just keep trucking. Anyway, I'm wearing a Crack the Sky shirt from 1989. But one of my most prized shirts that I was gonna wear today, but it's still cold in Columbus. And so all my vintage stuff is in storage, and when you keep vintage t-shirts in storage, you gotta run them through the cleaners to get the storage smell out. But I'm all this to say, I have a Lisa Cult Jam Spanish Fly Tour t-shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts in the world. And I was like, I'm gonna wear this to Miami. But then I picked it up and I was like, this smells like the inside of a storage unit. So instead I'm wearing this West Virginia band that no one cares about. Except me. I buy their records. That's it.
One of the ways you talk about freestyle, Alex, is how.
Can we
Yeah.
We know what we're talking about when we say freestyle, right? Lisa and the Cult Jam, even a Debbie Deb. Right? Okay, thank you. Okay, just.
I just assume if I know, everyone knows.
No, but I think the Black Eyed Peas ripped it off a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, a lot. I know it's really bad. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But talking about freestyle as a form that's sort of making do with what's there, what's available. I don't have access to a full band. I don't have access to session musicians. But freestyle.
Like a Casio.
Right.
Yeah.
I got a Casio, so
Yeah.
I can make music with that. And just I think and it's the way you describe it. I think brings it up. It's not my idea. It's yours, but it kind of echoes what I feel like a lot of what is great about Miami. like what's great about the city is how imaginative people are here and what they do with what's around. So I wanted to ask you about that, but then also, you know, if that brings up anything for you, Hanif, in Columbus. Maybe that was a bad question.
Not a bad question, it's a hard question, because it's like a flood of, you know, there's a flood of just visions of people staying alive here and making do, and especially right now, how hard the financial life is for so many people here. But, you know, I think Miami is also the capital of like the side hustle, like people doing what they have to do in order to stay alive, live here, feed themselves, do that thing. But I want to take a minute to think of a good example. So I'm gonna pass this over to me.
No, go ahead. Give me that question again. Like roll that.
Yeah, like basically. I mean, one of the things I love about Miami and like a lot of I think what I've seen.
Oh my gosh! I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I knew it was gonna happen.
I got it. Okay. Forgive the nerd is coming out again. But Beethoven, right? Beethoven. What was amazing about Beethoven is we think that Beethoven, you know, had this piano that he started composing on. But that's not true. Actually, the piano didn't really exist until Beethoven helped to invent it. So that as he was composing his music, he needed an instrument to fit what he wanted his imagination to do. So he had these like folks all over, I don't know, before Germany was Germany, you know, that whole stuff. So why I'm saying this is because when I found this out about Beethoven, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what they did with bass. Kids who didn't have fancy equipment, didn't have the access to do anything, but found a way to morph the instruments that they needed in order to make the sounds and the rhythms that were in their heads, right? That to me is a beautiful version of folks making do, and it's such a beautifully creative way, which Miami bass, it's not just a local phenomenon. It's just, God, my daughter has this song that she listens to that I make her say, I can't remember what it is. Might even be Taylor. That has this kind of Miami bass riff in it. And it just kind of saturates everything. But that to me is a great example of kids making things in order to produce the sounds and rhythms that are in their heads that have been handed to them by their parents and grandparents. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Norland yesterday, the high school, and talked a little bit about sampling. This isn't a Columbus-specific thing, but, you know, hip-hop, early hip-hop being built off of, or at least the sounds of it being built in part off of, like, pause tapes and as many samples as you needed. You know, Fight the Power has 21 samples. You know what I mean? Like, 21. This was, of course, before sample cases, like Biz Marquis sample case went to court. But that was in an era, like if you look at the liner notes of the first Tribe record, for example, some of those songs have like 15 to 25 samples because you had to break apart everything that you could to create like one harmonic, you know, sonic landscape. And so all that is, you know, my brothers and I would do that. We would like fuck around with our parents' records and scratch them up and cut them up, much to my parents' dismay. But we were looking for something that was in our head that we couldn't articulate otherwise. So that kind of seeking, I think, is useful. It's useful in the poem process, too, I think.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's, you know, you've both talked about writing about place as an act of preservation and archiving something that might not otherwise be written down. But I wonder if there is also, in that same sense, a creation, you know, and sort of like the materials are also giving rise to something which didn't exist before and wouldn't exist without the, without the effort or without the creative act.
Or it's just like building a mirror through which the place you live or were raised. I think about the first two Outkast albums, right? Southern Playalistic, Cadillac Music, and AT Aliens. Because we get two completely different reflections of Atlanta. At least I did for a kid growing up in the Midwest who had not, at that point, been to Atlanta. You get kind of, and I love both. I mean, I love, like, Outkast, the album run is almost immaculate, you know? But particularly on those first two records, you get this kind of idea of the South on Southern Playalistic that kind of mirrors a next evolution of, say, UGK, which is like, there's pimps here, there's Cadillacs here, there's, you know. But then AT Aliens, you get like a very futuristic version of Atlanta that actually still echoes today. Like if you look at JID's record, the JID record that came out last year, it's still toying with this idea of Atlanta as this futuristic space where giants wander, and it's almost like mythological in that nature, but that is in part because Outkast offered that with AT-Aliens, right? And so you get these throughout history, and I'm leaning on hip hop here, but you get that like throughout hip hop history. Bone Thugs and Harmony's like East 99 album, right? Like to me that wasn't a lot, but I talked to people who were like through that album I understood Cleveland as a mythological place, right? And so I don't even know if it's about building something new atop what's there as much as it is about treating the place you live and love with a kind of care that allows for it to be so large that anything can exist, right? When I was working on There's Always This Year, I would always run into this thing of like, gosh, am I beautifying the mythology of high school kids that I came up with too much? And it's like, well, no, because it's okay to say we were giants, you know, because no one else saw us that way, but we had to. It's as a mode of survival. And so if we had to tell ourselves that we were larger than life in order to survive, then we get to be that on the page. And in doing that, I get to, and collectively I think we get to, me and those people I'm writing about, we get to inhabit a Columbus that feels like it is another place entirely. And I think that's also useful.
Yeah. There's a song, and actually I didn't write down which song it is, so I don't remember. I only know it because of you. It's a Jacob Banks song.
You only know because of me?
Yeah.
Oh, I probably know which song. What's the
So
vibe?
the line is, I don't need an audience, but I could use a friend.
Oh yeah, that song's a bummer.
Yeah.
I love it, though.
That sounds good to me.
I mean, yeah, I love. To be clear, I love the song. If you haven't heard the Jacob Banks album, go listen to it. It was one of my favorite albums of last year, like easily.
Yeah. So when I heard the line, I really loved it, and I wrote it down. But I wanted to bring it up because I think it speaks to a commonality that I find in both your writing, which is, I think both of you fight hard against the idea of like critical remove, you know, of like this critic who's like coming down from Mount Olympus, like with the wisdom for the people. But it more feels like this is a friend telling me something that you're really excited about or that you want to share. And I'm going to throw a few questions at you, and you can just pull from the buffet of whichever one suits you. But so on the one sense, I think this points to a relationship with the reader, like, you know, like who do you think the reader is? But also your relationship to the musicians you're writing about. Because I know both your cases, you're friends with a lot of these people. These are not like, you know, people you've never met or trying to like keep your distance from to maintain some sort of sense of purity or objectivity, which obviously doesn't exist. So also talking about the concept of friendship in your work in all those senses.
Thank you, Scott. That's a beautiful question.
Thank you. I worked really hard on it.
I can feel this, you know, I can feel it. But I guess one of the things I learned early on as a scholar is, you know, the interviews I do are friends that I want to make. And I'm very lucky that that people have agreed and been incredibly generous with their time, with their stories. And entrusting me with those stories because, you know, I'm not I refuse the anthropological hat. I refuse this idea that I'm speaking for anybody. But when I'm talking about musicians, it's my hope that what they tell me and their music is kind of being felt in the ways that I write about them. Because to me, it's always honor the performance first, always honor the musicians first. While I am very present, I also think it's important, you know, I don't want to have that narcissistic reflex that it's about me somehow, because I think that that's a really common pattern that we're finding, I think, due to social media, that people think it's about them, but what I hope is that it helps to radiate outwards and almost decenter me completely through my intimacy with the people in the book. Linda Williams, can I talk about you? The great Linda Williams in the second row here, really important community activist. I call her the queen of the Grove because she is like the medicine woman for that neighborhood that continues to face so many challenges and violence. And So getting to know Ms. Williams was such a fantastic experience for me because she's one of the many people who, while you might not think of Linda Williams as being a musician, but she told me this story, if I may. As part of the old veteran folks that live in Coconut Grove West, right, part of the problem is that the trees overhang, and of course during hurricane season that can be really difficult and cause a lot of property damage. Seeing this very specific, very crucial need in her community, Miss Williams decides, oh, she's gonna figure out how to get, right, the tree cutters there. But here's the thing, as she's telling this, and because she's been in the neighborhood since she was born and knows all the old folks in the Grove, she knows that, oh, so-and-so over here, they watch their soap at this time. Oh, so-and-so here goes to the doctor at this time. So-and-so here. And so here, you know, like when you talk to Linda Williams, it's like that stupid Russell Crowe movie, A Beautiful Mind. You see like a physics equation going in front of his head. Linda Williams does that work in trying to help and heal and do an actual concrete thing for her community. But at the same time, isn't that what a really good drummer does? To be able to know the musicians around them and what their timing is, and to be able to choreograph or to be able to keep everybody in beat or in the same song texture together. So as much as what I love about Oh Miami is that it's very capacious about the idea of who is a poet and what is a poet or what is even poetry, because the poetry world can get really annoying, I'm sorry, in terms of its insularity, in terms of that whole thing. But what part of, I think, this initiative does is, you know, open up the idea of poet. Part of, if I may humbly say, part of what I also try to do is to open up the category of musician too. And so Linda Williams, not only is she an amazing community advocate, but also a badass drummer. But I mean, there's constant stories. So Benny Lattimore, some of you who might know, you know, he was called the love philosopher, really important musician from the 70s, R&B, like all over the country. Amazing song called Let's Straighten It Out. You know, and he lives in Tampa now, he's like 82. And I needed to fact check this annoying music thing off a record. Like, well, did Little Beaver play on this or whatever? I was very lucky to be connected to him, and this is after I finished the book, right? And I'm just doing these little fact-checky things, and I call Mr. Lattimore, and I'm thinking I'm just gonna ask him about this session. And then the next thing I know, I'm in hour 3 of a history of Tennessee sharecropping, you know, and it was amazing. Like, I got this deep education from the love philosopher in his very characteristic, almost Barry White, you know, baritone voice. And over again, I've had the beauty of musicians doing this for me. Gwen McRae was another one. Luther Campbell, one of the amazing historian of Miami, you know, shared incredible anecdotes with me. And if I can just permit me one, and I'm gonna shut up. But Luther Campbell, you know, he grew up, his mom had a salon in Liberty City. And he said growing up, you know, he used to have to sweep up the hair. You know, some of you might be familiar with this, like sweep up all that stuff. And as he was growing up, he heard a lot of Millie Jackson, and with his dad, a lot of Burt Bacharach, and especially Dionne Warwick. So I'm interviewing Luther Campbell, the great, you know, and, you know, he starts singing Dionne Warwick's, what do you do when you fall in love? Luther Campbell, we're familiar with his voice, right? And Dionne Warwick doesn't like bad words, right? So it was this, but what was beautiful about him doing that is that every time now I hear Luke on some of that nasty stuff that he was, which sound, you know, I hear Dionne Warwick, and adversely, every time I hear Dionne Warwick, I hear Luke, right? And it's only through this kind of amazing sharing of this throwaway anecdote for a lot of musicians that I find to be magical, philosophical, historical, and transformative. And that's why I think part of the important thing we have to do as scholars is just keep talking to people and making friends. I don't want an audience, I want to make friends, which is why I might have to write another book. But anyway.
I've got nothing better than that. So yeah.
That's a good, the Dionne Warwick and Luke is hilarious,
it's great.
right?
It's incredible.
And also thinking about those ladies getting their hair done to Millie Jackson, who is also
pretty
was she
filthy.
Is she Philly? Where is she from?
Um, let's end it there.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
But hold on 1 second. No, I just I want to thank both of you for being here and for sharing all of this and for writing about places and keeping places alive, you know, and doing that project. And I hope also inspiring people to also take up that challenge. You know, Miami is a place that is huge and is misrecognized constantly, and I know everybody out here sees it in various ways. And so whether that's through writing or something else, yeah, I hope people feel inspired to go and keep doing that work. But thank both of you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Come on,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Is the bar still open or is that over?
I don't know. I can't speak for the bar. I know Books and Books is out there selling books. The authors, I'm going to take them through the back and we'll do a signing. And thank you all again for being here and safe travels tonight.